So the other day, I went to go see a movie called American Fiction. Have you seen this yet?
Not yet. It sounds interesting. I have not seen it,
So it's an MGM film. And
but there is no MGM.
yeah, whatever, whatever MGM is
Whatever it
now.
is that they're calling MGM.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and as I'm reading your book and thinking about that movie, I'm realizing how much Louis Mayer would have hated this film.
Oh, he would have hated it.
Absolutely
Hated
hated
it.
it. Um,
Hated it.
and you know, you describe Mayer as this guy who's just totally opposed to like social message films. And this guy who fundamentally believed in this aesthetic of films from the later 40s that showed this family unit, this kind of normalized family unit. Can you describe the change in the consumption habits and preferences of the audience that Mayer wasn't really able to keep up
That
with?
was the problem. That was the problem. Mayer's idea of movie making, he said it. We make beautiful films about beautiful people. And if that is not your opinion or your aesthetic, you don't belong at Metro-Goldwyn Mayer, my studio. The archetypal MGM film under Louis Mayer's regime was Meet Me in St. Louis. Do you know that? A musical by Vincent Minnelli, 1944, Judy Garland. It's about family values. It's an idealized version of old America that represented Mayer's aesthetic. He he believed in America. He was an immigrant. He was an American citizen, an American patriot. He was very much a right wing Republican. And this, by the way, Hollywood was Republican in the era that I'm talking about, was run by people whose political views were right of center. So he had a vision of entertainment.
Huh.
There was no mistake that MGM's greatest genre was the musical,
Mm.
because that represented the sort of aesthetic of beauty that Mayer was interested in. Because his taste was not producing profits in the late 40s, the unthinkable happened and he was deposed. And his successor, Dory Sherry, a very different man, was interested in films with social comment,
Yes.
black and white films about political issues.
Who's also
What
an
could be,
avowed liberal, right? He's a
and he
liberal,
was a
he's an
liberal.
activist,
He
yeah.
was an activist, a liberal, what we would call in today's terms a progressive, political progressive. He was not a communist, but he was what was called an anti-communist liberal. Very different from Mayer's aesthetic. And he began to release films like The Asphalt Jungle, which was MGM and a big hit, about a heist, Blackboard Jungle, about juvenile delinquency in an inner city high school. And Mayer said, I wouldn't walk across the street to see films like
I
that.
remember that quote. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, and Mayer would be horrified by a
yeah,
film like American Fiction under the label of my studio. Are you kidding?
yeah. It's I couldn't get that out of my head. It's now you describe Dory Shari had, these initial breakout films. He did very well when he first got there.
Yes, he did.
He did Battleground and The Next Voice You Hear were both well received for him.
Yes, they were.
Um, and then it started to go downhill after that point. Do you think that was
It went downhill for just about every studio at that time. Profits declined. They were having trouble finding what does the audience want to see. So it was
um,
a period of great uncertainty.
because Dory Shari was so different from his predecessor? Do you think that that caused a lot of tension at MGM? Because you have like a couple mixed accounts here. It depends on who you ask. If you look at the
Yes,
musical department, they didn't like him too much.
they couldn't stand him. Sid Charisse I have a wonderful quote from her. Uh, he was the beginning of the end for MGM.
Yeah.
She said he knew nothing about musicals, nothing, and he didn't like them. And so there was a great tension, and the musical department at MGM, which was MGM's most recognized department, was dismantled. The MGM singers and dancers, the contract players, contracts were not renewed, directors left, And the MGM musical department, by the end of the 50s, pretty much over. And that was in musicals were expensive to make, and Dory Sherry didn't want to spend a lot of that kind of money, and he personally didn't care for the form.
Hmm.
He also didn't like Ancient World Epics, which is a favorite of mine. Nobody else likes them but me. I realize I love them, and he didn't want to make those either. And he hated 3D. He hated CinemaScope. He hated all the new technologies. He wanted small screen, black and white problem pictures with social messages and liberal social messages. And that formula was not going to work for very long. And it didn't. By 1956, he was out. And then MGM went into free fall and was basically over by the early 60s.